The future of the United States stranded astronauts remains uncertain as the return has been pushed farther back. This has happened as there are questions about the safety of the ISS itself, as a potentially catastrophic leak has been discovered on the Russian module. The safest thing to do would be to slowly decompress the module. If that leak were to rapidly decompress, it would send the entire ISS spinning into oblivion, and the Russians are not cooperating. This is made slightly more complicated as escape capsules are questionable at this time. Astronauts do rely on the ship that they came up on. Given that the Starliner is not operable, there are other options like the Dragon capsule. However, each craft requires that you have specific spacesuits so that they can be compatible with that ship in order to maintain your life. Additional spacesuits were supposed to have been dropped off for our astronauts. There is the option of using the Russian Soyuz ships, but there's no answer as to whether or not they would be allowed to. With the condition of the Russian module, there are questions about maintenance, as well as safety given tensions. At any given time, 6 astronauts could leave the facility if everything went entirely perfectly. Astronauts rarely spend more than 6 months in space, but we're looking at 10 months or more for what was supposed to be an 8-day trip. That's not to say that these kinds of things don't happen. Sergei Krikalev was the astronaut who was forgotten in space during the fall of the Soviet Union. It required international cooperation to get him back, as the country that he had launched from was no longer in existence. He spent 311 days in space. Granted, he was up there entirely alone and no way to go home. It's said that when people came to rescue him after 10 months in space, he did not want to leave. He refused to leave until someone could take over the Mir space station because it required a body there. And of course, there have been astronauts who have spent more than a year on a space station by choice and not because they were stranded. Being in space is incredibly hazardous to your health. We are essentially not made to be in a microgravity environment without our atmosphere. The atmosphere protects us from radiation from our sun. Each day that passes, you increase your risk for not just things like osteoporosis and blindness, which is likely caused by the microgravity, but you are also going to be exposed to radiation that can cause cancer. Ultimately, your organs will start to deteriorate, and if you have any medical emergencies, you may not have someone there in time to help you. Granted, there is also the issue of antibiotic-resistant bacteria on the ISS, and that is literally caused by the radiation, causing hypermutation in bacteria, along with the use of antibiotics on the ISS. Essentially, what we use in my field to figure out if something is a mutagen is to see how quickly bacteria develop antibiotic resistance. You may say what you will, but this is an embarrassment. We already knew that Boeing was having problems before this mission took place. NASA has already launched an investigation that has found that Boeing is incredibly inefficient. They cut corners to the point of being dangerous. If the international community could come together and get Sergei back on the ground in 10 months with a country that fell, we should be able to get our astronauts home, especially with the potential of catastrophe right now.
Complex than the tiny prokaryotes swarming in the culture.